We're here today to have a conversation with Brian Gibbons of the LeasePurchaseGuys.com. Brian has over 30 years experience helping people with financial issues, helping home sellers maximize their equity dollars, especially in today's buyer's market. We are excited to learn more about how home sellers can get top dollar for their home. They can save realtor commission fees and all within 45 days in most cases. Brian, welcome.
Jen, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Can you please tell us some more about the LeasePurchaseGuys.com business model? We're really excited to hear about this.
Sure. Right now, home sellers have challenges, real challenges. It's currently a buyer's market in most places all over the country. And it's safe to say 90% of the country. And one of the reasons is, it's really hard to get a home loan. Credit has been tightened up, especially the last 24 months. So what we do is we help the sellers sell not for cash, but on terms. And we're going to discuss a little bit about that today. What other choices besides selling for cash with an agent can they do?
There are choices.
Well, if you're creative and you know what you're doing.
Brian, you spoke earlier about some challenges that sellers of their home sellers are experiencing. Talk to me about some of those that you're seeing.
Sure. Let's say that you bought at the top of the market, right around 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And you paid a price for your property based on other properties that were selling in the area. And a lot of houses have lost value. And you're trying to sell today. It's almost scary, isn't it? Because when you add in all the fees that it costs to sell, a lot of people know that they have to pay an agent, but there's other costs. There's closing costs, which are generally about 2% on top of the agent's fee. And then there's something in a buyer's market that you never have to pay. It's called seller's concessions. And these seller's concessions is basically you're giving equity away out of your house to sell your house. So if you ask anyone, really, how much does it cost to sell? I'll give you a number, and it's about 10 to 15% of the value of the house. So let's think about that poor seller that bought at the top of the market. They've lost some value. How do they sell their house today?
And they're upside down.
Can I give you an example?
I would love an example.
Here's how an example works. Let's say that you have a $500,000 house. Now, if you're in some parts of the market, in the country, a really nice house might be $200,000, but let's just use $500,000 as a number. And you bought it at the top of the market, and your agent comes in and says, these are the comparable values. We're going to list it at these values, the average comps. And that's most agents are trained to do that. So the comps come in at 500, but guess what? You bought the house for $575. $75,000 above that. So you list it for 500 and see if maybe they can raise the price with the buyer negotiation.
$75,000 is a huge gap.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But here's the other problem. If you just sell it with everybody else's, you're just comparing apples to apples to apples, and you may not get any buyers because the buyers want that $500,000 house even cheaper. So the $500,000 houses, not the list price, but the actual sales price might even be $450.
And that 75 is not 75 anymore.
So the bottom line for sellers is they may have to, if they bought at top of the market, pay to get rid of the house because they're going to sell it at, let's say, best case, a $500,000 house in the buyer's market might sell for $475. But with all those costs taken out, their net might be $440, $430. And then they have to pay, they owe the $575 mortgage.
And then there's a real estate agent involved. So what can home sellers do? How can they, what is the solution to this? Can they get out of this?
Well, let's talk about a short sale. Now, I'm not an attorney. This isn't legal advice. I'm giving a big disclaimer here. But a lot of agents throw out short sales. Why don't you try to do a short sale? Why don't you go through the HAMP program? Why don't you do all the rest of this other stuff?
Especially right now. It's a lot of that.
Well, a lot of short sales aren't approved. And the time delay is amazing. It's 6 to 12 months wait for an answer. Can you imagine having to move? So let's just keep it really simple. Selling for cash with an agent, if you bought at the top of the market, it's going to cost you money to get rid of the house
Sure.
if you do that. So what's another solution? You could, what? Rent it out?
That's scary. That's got its own issues there.
You know, renting out a modest house with not great furnishings and not great appliances and, you know, it's not in the best shape, who cares, you know? They can beat that house up. You don't really care.
What about a $500,000 home, though? What about
What if it's a custom executive home
Mm-hmm.
that has gorgeous, I mean, you know, you really have taken care of this house. It's one of the best houses on the street. Do you want to rent that house out? You know, the law requires that you can only get so much for a security deposit. You can't ask anymore. So that kind of hamstrings you, doesn't it?
It does.
The other thing is, if you get a property manager, there's no guarantees with a property manager. You have to hope and pray that they really do a good job, and you have to pay 10% of the collected rent. So most of our clients that are trying to sell their beautiful house, they maybe are a little bit upside down or no equity, they don't want to rent. They need another solution.
All right, so what if a home seller calls the leasepurchaseguys.com? What's it going to look like? What are you guys going to do?
Well, I'm going to tell you the biggest benefit of using us. Okay? We're going to give you a third alternative. And here's how it works. Let's compare it with renting. Let's say that you have a $500,000 house, and let's say that your rent payment on that beautiful house is $2,500 a month. That's the maximum market rent you're going to get out of that beautiful house. $500,000 house.
Mm.
But what if your PITI payment is $3,500? Your carrying cost for that house, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, $3,500. The difference is $1,000.
Yeah, huge deficit.
How'd you like to pay that every month for something you're not using?
No thanks.
And then you have vacancy. You got to clean it up, remarket it, pay the mortgage for an empty house, and do it again. There's no guarantees whatsoever with an agent. I'm sorry, with a tenant that's unproven. Okay, so this is our solution. We're going to walk through your house. We're going to compare it with all the other houses in the street, and we're going to come up with a number that's fair. Okay, as far as a real value. And then we're going to find an executive person that is just a little bit far away from getting approved for a mortgage. Think of the people that are having a hard time getting a mortgage today. One of our favorite types of people put in our houses, our beautiful houses, are professional people. We work with companies in our area, and we talk to their HR departments, and we say, who are the new executives coming in? Now, they can't get mortgages because they need to establish themselves first before they can get another mortgage, even if they just sold their house in another state.
Right.
And you know what? They don't want to be in a real junky condo townhouse thing. They need that executive home right now, and they're not for rent. They're for sale, but they're not for rent. So temporary housing, they don't want to do that. And that's where we come in. We get them into that cul-de-sac. We get them into where the kids can go out and play and not get any traffic.
The American dream.
The school district is so important.
Sure.
You know, some of our distributors of the leasepurchaseguys.com, you know, they really have great school districts and terrible school districts. I mean, just a couple miles away,
Sure.
it can be drastic. I'm talking about safety. I'm talking about effectiveness. I'm talking about, you know, the kids are happy. You know, in some terrible school districts, your kids get bullied and beaten up. You know,
Yeah.
It's amazing the risk of not getting the right school district. So that's really, you're buying not just the house, but the neighborhood
Sure.
and the prestige. You know, a lot of our young executives, they just want to be in that neighborhood that they can call home. And it doesn't matter if they're leasing for a while and then owning or owning. It doesn't really matter. So do you see where the benefit lies? The person moving in is a very responsible person,
Right.
wants to own it. They might even improve the property for you, take money out of their pocket because they're highly paid. And they'll pay not just rent, but more. Let me describe that to you. It's one of our innovative concepts. The market rent, we can't charge more than market rent because when they get the mortgage, there's going to be a rental appraisal, and the underwriter for the mortgage doesn't want you paying spiked rent.
Sure.
So we'll do a market rent appraisal for the house. So if it's $2,500, that's what they pay. How do we get the balance? $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, we use that in a creative way, and we go through that with our sellers when we sit down with them. But our number one goal is to get that whole PITI payment paid to you. Wow. Wouldn't that be awesome?
I mean, that would just ring beautifully in these sellers' ears to hear that.
Well, there's three options. Just keep it this simple. If you want to avoid the short sale, that's not an option to us. Bankruptcy is not an option to us. That's a terrible idea. But the only three options are sell it for cash with an agent and lose 10 to 15% of the value of the house. You can rent it out and not meet your PITI obligations and deal with damage and deal with all this other junk. Or you can be creative and sell on terms, which what we do. And we get top sales price for your house. You avoid an agent's commission. You avoid closing costs. You avoid seller's concessions. And one of the biggest things is you avoid a price reduction. Because the price reduction, let's say that you're an unrealistic seller. Let's say that all the comps come in at 500, and you say, I need 525 for the house, no matter what, in order to earn your fee.
Right.
Okay? So you list it for 525, and the agent just signs the listing. You know, I just need a listing. I need to make some money. But 2 weeks before the listing expires, they come back and say, we got to reduce the price $60,000.
It's devastating.
To me, it's a bait and switch. I don't really like that. And I don't think the sellers really like that. Yeah. Because why didn't they just say, look, if you sell for cash in this market, the best price you're going to get is this, and these are the costs to sell, and this is your net. They don't approach this from a financial planning kind of concept. And that's what we do. We show all the options. If you sell with an agent, it's going to be about this. If you rent it out, this is this, and this is the risk. And if you do it our way, you're going to get a top sales price without the agent's commission, without all these benefits.
So what's the downside, Brian, to this? I mean,
Let's talk about the worst case scenario. It's just like being a landlord. What's the worst case scenario of being a landlord? They don't pay you.
And you're stuck.
Well, you get them out. And we'll actually talk to them for you because we have a rapport with them. We put them in there.
So you have that relationship established, and that's your responsibility, not...
Well, it's not our legal responsibility, but it's our moral responsibility
you take that on.
To do the following. We will sit down with them. We'll make an appointment to see them. It says, where's the bottleneck? Why isn't this bill getting paid? Because we're pretty strict, by the way. If they don't pay on time, we have to start legal proceedings. Because the seller is our client.
Sure, and you're protecting them. Why do real estate agents not talk to sellers about this option?
I'm a little nervous of answering this question because I don't live in real estate agents' offices, but I can guess. I've known over the last 30 years hundreds of brokers. Now, brokers are managers of agents.
Right, for sure.
They're trained to go find somebody that will list a house. And that's all they do generally. So listing agents is a specialty. They talk to home sellers and they list a house. And that's half their business. The other half of their business is finding bank-qualified cash buyers to come through a house that they have listed. So they can get both sides of the commission. They can get the 3% seller side, 3% buyer side. Okay? There are some agencies out there that just list, and that's all they do. And they find somebody else, and they get only their 3%. They don't get both sides of the fence. Now, if I've heard some brokers say, I don't want my agents talking about anything creative with the seller. I want them to sell for cash and do a lot of them. Because selling on terms, we just don't do. This is our model.
That's where you come in.
Well, I've even heard other things. I've heard people saying, oh, that rent-to-own's illegal, or that lease purchase is illegal. Commercial people do it all the time. let's say you had a strip mall and you tried to sell it for cash for 500,000 or a million or whatever, and you couldn't find one. So you say, owner will finance, 20% down, we'll carry the paper.
Right.
They do it all the time.
Right.
But residential agents are not trained on a high level of creativity to sell their house. And I'm happy about that.
Well, sure. Of course you are. Of course
Because
you
it
are.
allows us to enter the market to have 3 choices now instead of 2.
All right, so here's a scenario for you. What if there's you have your real estate agent, you've got this listing agreement, things aren't moving. They're not moving. And you're still time on your listing agreement.
Right.
Then what? What can a seller do?
Well, they can contact us and we'll give them a consultation for free.
Which looks like you coming to their home and chatting
We'll
with
walk
them.
through the home. We'll say, well, show me the comps that the agent showed you. You know, and we'll bring our own comps.
Okay.
And we'll see if any of them match up. Maybe they didn't do a good job with the comps. I don't know what happened. And then we'll analyze the listing agreement. And then we'll do 1 or 2 things. We'll ask the broker to make an addendum to the listing agreement, saying that they will allow them to also market for rent-to-own buyers.
Okay.
Because we want to increase the number of people walking through the house.
Of course. Of course.
We don't want to get in the way of the agent. But, you know, when they market the house just for cash, you ever see an MLS listing? It just generally doesn't talk about owner will carry lease purchase. They don't say any of helping them with the financing.
Right.
They just talk about, this is a beautiful house and it's a great price. And you get in here before it gets snapped up. It's a buyer's market. And there's so many, I'm going to use an analogy, an upside down wedding cake. You know how a wedding cake is skinny at the top and it gets really fat at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay. Well, think about all the houses that are for sale at the bottom of the cake, and there's only a few buyers that are cash qualified. Well, in my business, I have an upside down wedding cake where it's really fat at the top with all the buyers that want that beautiful house. But there's only a few houses that are going to be creative. They're going to help the buyer buy it. It's one of our bylines. I will only deal with a seller if they really want to help that buyer buy it. And they have to be very flexible. We'll get them the top sales price. We'll avoid the sales commission. But what if it takes 3 to 5 years to get their money? That's what it takes. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, Brian, I think the next question is really, how do we get started? How does a seller get started with the leasepurchaseguys.com? What do they need to do? Tell us.
Well, you know, first of all, go to our website. That's the first step. We don't even want to have a conversation with you just yet until you go through our website, because we have some videos. And isn't it nice to have a cup of coffee and watch a 40-minute video and know exactly what we do? Okay,
and again, that website is theleasepurchaseguys.com.
Yeah, and there's a THE in front of there.
Right.
THE, leasepurchaseguys.com. And this saves time because there's some education involved with this.
Learning more and just really educating themselves about what you guys are all about.
The other thing is we refuse to work with sellers unless we talk to their advisor too. There's a reason for that.
I was going to say, why?
See, I'm coming from a financial planning perspective with this. I'm not looking just to sell a house.
And you have experience in that.
I'm very good with retirement planning, estate planning, and all the rest of that other stuff. And I want to talk to their advisor and give them some more detail. Like if they have a CPA as an advisor, I want to give them the tax ramifications of this. Or if they have a CFP financial planner, I want to tell them exactly the detail. And I want them to know the good, the bad, and the ugly of this.
That's great.
Okay.
Honesty. You're being honest, and then you're also really concerned about the buyer.
I want them to have advice.
And good advice.
Yeah, well, they have advisors. Most of our home sellers, they come from an executive level. We have doctors, we have dentists, we have highly paid executives. All of these people, they all have great advisors, and it's so much easier. And we'll go to their advisor's office, wherever it is, and sit down and go through the agreement with them. Because we're coming at it from a perspective of maximizing their wealth, right? We don't want them to pierce their IRA or their 401k. They have to pay a penalty for that.
Yeah. Well, so this, this sounds
we love
great.
what we do.
Yeah.
We want you to get educated first. We want you to hear our presentation. We want to show the agreements to your advisor. And then if that all works, then we'll get to work. And guess what? The biggest positive reason for a home seller to get a hold of us, it costs you nothing.
It's a win-win.
I'm serious. When we get to work, it costs you nothing. We get paid by the buyer.
So go to the website, right? And then educate yourself on what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
It's a great thing you're doing. And then contact you guys.
Well, after you see the videos, you know, there'll be contact details. Give us a ring. We are a little busy. There's so many homes sellers. I don't know if you can fathom how many of these houses have no equity or a little bit upside down right now. There's 20 million of them. So
that's overwhelming.
We'll take 10% of that. You know, it's a win-win. Nobody's losing in this.
That's great. That's great. And I appreciate you being here to help.
Thank you.
Yeah. Brian Gibbons here with the LeasePurchaseGuys.com. We thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.